Our next speaker, his last name may be dull, but he has a personality that is so bright. Welcome, Dr. Michael Brass, in his speech, Double Jeopardy. Dr. Michael Brass, in his speech, Double Jeopardy.
Hi, thanks a lot. Good afternoon, everyone. Goeiemiddag, Nathan, and other Zuid-Afrikaners. It won't surprise Dr. Hasib to hear that I will go a little bit against the wind, at least in terms of wording. Nor would it actually surprise my cat to hear this. He's joining the conference at my feet. I don't actually go into personal branding as originally understood in the marketing world, in the marketing institutions. Instead, I actually take a stance of having built up two professions based upon professionalism, integrity, outreach, and the application of knowledge. I am fully aware that this falls under some modern definitions of branding. Me, however, I view it as being true to myself and being true to human values in many different cultures. Obviously, as you just heard at the start, I am actually from South Africa, like some of our listeners, where we have 11 official languages and many more cultures. I live in the United Kingdom, I work in the United Kingdom, and I also work in the Sudan. Anyway, let's just say who I am, and then I'll move back into the past to move forward. So I'm taking a little bit of a different perspective from our last two magnificent speakers. So at the moment, I'm at a company called UBSense, where I head the global IT and I head the information security for the organization on a global scale. I essentially advise the business on security to protect their revenue generation activities and their data. I'm also a CompTIA, a subject matter expert, and a BCS, which used to be called the British Computer Society. I'm an assessor for them. In addition, I am a non-salaried staff member at University College London. I have a PhD in archaeology, and I co-direct a mission, an archaeological mission in the Sudan. Now, a question I get asked very often is how the hell did I arrive at all of this? And sorry, I'm just making some adjustments on my screen. So my father was originally in IT when I was growing up. My father was also an absolute arsehole at the same time. He didn't want me to do archaeology, and there were various other matters. So there's actually a bit of an irony in me ending up in IT and security. As I said, there's a fractious relationship. My upbringing was such that there was not a lot of money around, but on the other hand, my parents were divorced. He was actually very rich, and the upshot at the end of all of that is, by court order, I had actually got a very good education. I was extremely lucky in that regard. And I also was able to force his employer to sponsor my undergraduate education. So I've got undergraduate in history, in archaeology. I've got an MA in archaeology, a PhD sitting there in archaeology. And in the last year of my studies at the University of Cape Town, I was wondering what I was going to do after that. And I had British citizenship at the same time. And for various reasons, I was going to move across here to the UK. And so I was sitting wondering, well, what else do I actually know? How could I be able to support myself? And the only other thing, as I said, ironically, that I knew happened to be some IT. So I did some IT background. Some studies there, moved across here to the UK, was employed here in the UK at Oxford University Press, and then for 2 months at the Oxford Archaeological Unit, which for me as the second contract role was a dream come true, trying to combine the two. And I did some other contract roles, then did my master's full time. I then moved across to Cambridge after my master's, which was 2003 to 2004. And I joined a venture capital company where I was the system administrator and the senior systems administrator. Unfortunately, the person who joined as the IT manager during my time there decided to outsource my role right as the Great Recession hit at the end of 2008. And I was 3 months away from being homeless. This is a story I've told quite a few times to different people. What was extremely fortunate is 2 months after I got told that my job was being made redundant and my last salary was actually at Christmas time there, on the 15th or 16th of January the following year, is I got hired as the IT manager down in London at an organization called the Institute for Government, which was founded by former Science Minister in Tony Blair's government. And the aim of this think tank was to improve the machinery of government, to make the machinery, so not the policies, just the machinery, operate more efficiently. And I was the 13th staff member. And going from being a senior systems administrator in one of the top 10, but still very small venture capital companies, to that sort of pressure of a startup, which was headed by Lord Michael Bishard, who chaired the Sloan Inquiry here in the UK and had numerous political connections into government, was quite daunting. And I was one of 3 people who oversaw a move from the premise at the Royal Academy of Engineering into, it was literally about 20 meters away, the new building, and that was a £3 million revamp. And so, as I said, I was one of 3 people that was in charge of all of that. At the same time, I actually started my PhD part-time at University College London under the same person who had supervised my master's. And I took a year's break, etc., and I completed that PhD in March 2016. That was when my Viva was. During that time, I was able to do the archaeology studies and everything else through a combination of the archives being available here in the United Kingdom, as well as the travel backwards and forwards over all of that. So I effectively did my PhD on the train, backwards and forwards for 4 hours a day. In terms of what I was doing then at IFG, so I was just doing the usual, upskilling myself, etc., but I don't want to really go into that too much. What I do want to mention is that the focus of my PhD was actually a site in the Sudan that was excavated by the founder of the Wellcome Trust, the huge medical organization institution here in the UK. And there were lots of series of skill sets that I was also picking up and during the course of my PhD. And this is where I actually get quite tired of people who go in and say, you don't need a formal education to be successful. Now, that is true in a large majority of cases. The facilities manager at IFG was one such person, and he's one of the most street smart, wonderful, great people that I would ever meet in my entire life. But if you're going into a whole lot of senior management, now, it doesn't rule out there are successful people who've had no formal education, but there's a whole series of skills that are transferable from the formal education into private sector, into government sectors, etc. And I think that is an extremely worthwhile part of anybody's career course. Anyway, as soon as when I came to the end of that PhD, I got some funding to actually go out to the Sudan for the first time. The site that I'm working on was the focus of my entire PhD. And I recall at the start of my PhD, I'm aware I'm just about to run out of some time, that there were certain other archaeologists who were very favorable in me undertaking this particular type of work at the site. When they saw the nature of the results that were starting to come out of this archival research, they turned against it. And shortly before I was due to go out in October 2017 to the site for the very first time, 2 of those people turned around and attempted to inform the Sudanese Antiquities Authority that they should not be providing a license to University College London and indeed to myself to actually excavate the site. The head of the Antiquity Service was somebody who knew me, somebody who had actually trusted my research, because I had spoken to him at some length at 2 conferences, and he outright denied and told this particular institution that they do not control Sudanese archaeology, that he has a very high opinion of me, and he's going to let this research go ahead. And in fact, the results that have come out now over the course of 3 field seasons happen to include things like the second oldest domesticated sorghum, which is the most widely used cereal in Africa, from any time period in the world, from about 4,500 years ago. None of this would have actually happened, and indeed, I wouldn't have got my current position if you don't act in a way that is perceived as professional, and you aren't professional in all your dealings, and you don't project your knowledge out there. So in a nutshell, for the Sudan, we're now held up as a model project. The methods that we have pioneered, from myself to my co-director to my wife, who's the deputy director, and we illustrate this in our various publications. They show this as a way of illuminating how to actually clear obstacles from one path. And these are lessons that I've also taken into the private sector, into my everyday job.